Hey guys, welcome to C++ tutorial. In this lecture, we will be dealing with primitive data types and their memory allocation. So what are data types? If we want to store some type of information such as numeric data or an expression, we use data types to store these. There are basically 6 types of data types: int, float, double, char, void, and boolean. All these data types help us to store information of various types. So let us look at them one by one. Int. This is used for integer type data, basically numerical data. Float. This is used for single precision decimal type data. Single precision. Double is used for double precision decimal type data. The difference between double and float is that double is used for double precision and float is used for single precision decimal type. Moving on to char, this is used for representing a single character such as any alphabet such as A or any symbol, dollar, etc. Void is used for valueless data which does not return a value. This is important that it does not return a value. Coming on to boolean, this is used for true-false type data. The data has two stages, either it is true or it is false. So a variable of all these data types can be used to store various information such as numeric data, any expression, etc. So how to declare these variables? We'll move on to declaration of variables of various data types so that we can store information. So any name of a function, a variable, a class, an object, etc. is known as an identifier. For example, if we name a variable, the name of that variable is known as an identifier. So there are certain rules for naming an identifier. We'll look at those rules one by one. The first rule is C++ is a case-sensitive language. That is, if you name a variable in uppercase and you give the same name in lowercase, both the variables are treated as different. The second rule states that the name of any variable or a function or class should contain only these characters, and it cannot start with a digit. This is important that it cannot start with a digit and contain only these characters. Any other character won't be accepted. Third rule is the name of an identifier cannot have the same name as a keyword. So what is a keyword? Keyword is basically the language of C++, all the words in the language of C++ which we use, such as the names of data types, int, float, double, all these are keywords. In int A, int is the keyword and A is the identifier, the variable which we are using. So this is how we declare a variable of particular data type. This expression is followed by a semicolon at the end. Similarly, we can declare variables of other data types as well. You can see that here A, B, sum, C, is solved are all identifiers and they contain these characters only and do not start with a digit according to the rules for naming an identifier. So now if you want to initialize a variable, initializing a variable means giving an initial value to a variable in the beginning of the program. So we can initialize all these data types in this way. So now moving on to code blocks to try all these data types. Let's make an empty file, saving this primitive data types.cpp. In the last lecture, we discussed that we need to save the file in order to run and debug it. include IOStream using namespace std int main and we return 0 at the last. This is the function where we'll be writing our main program. So first we'll try out int data type. We'll initialize and declare a variable of the int data type. Int a is equal to, let's say, 10. Now we'll print the value of this variable on the screen. In the last video, we saw that for printing any expression, we need to enclose it within quotation marks. But for printing the value of any variable, we do not need to enclose it within quotation marks. We just write it as it is, cout a endl. ENDL is basically a new line character. It is similar to pressing enter key on your keyboard. Now let's run the program. You need to build and run it. On the screen, we can see a 10 and an empty line. This empty line has appeared because of the endl command we gave. So now let's try out other data types. Declaring and initializing float data type. Float b is equal to 10. Let's print the value of the variable in the same way as we did for int data type. Moving on to double data type. Printing the value of c. Moving on to char data type. For initializing a variable of the char data type, we enclose the character within single inverted commas. For numeric data types such as int, float, double, we do not need to enclose the value within any quotation marks. But for char, we need to enclose it within single quotation marks. Let's run it. As you can see, the output on the screen, 10, 10, and at the last, an A. Now let's change some values and then observe the output. Let's make it 10.547, 10. Now let's try running the program. You can see the difference. Moving on to memory allocation of these data types. So we know a byte contains of 8 bits. 1 byte is equal to 8 bits. You can see this is a byte. This has 8 bits in total. Everything in computer is stored in binary form. Either it is true, that is 1, or it is false, that is 0. So every bit can store two combinations, either 0 or 1. So total 8 bits can store 2 to the power 8 combinations. Because 1 byte has 8 bits, so total possible combinations a byte can store is 2 to the power 8, that is 256. So now let's have a look. The char has a typical bit width of 1 byte, that is, 1 byte is allocated to char data type, 4 bytes is allocated to int data type, 4 bytes is allocated to float data type, and 8 bytes are allocated to double data type. Accordingly, we can see the ranges. 2 to the power 8 is 256. So if we have negative, then it gets divided into 2 on both the sides of 0. So we can have a look at all the ranges. You don't have to memorize, just keep in mind. So now let's look at what are data type modifiers. There are 4 data type modifiers: unsigned, signed, short, and long. They modify the basic data types which we studied. For example, unsigned, it considers only the positive values. You can compare it with simple char. See, it is having 0 to 255. It's not considering the negative values. In comparison, signed data type has both positive and negative values, so it is taking minus 127 to 127 range. Short data type reduces the memory allocation to a particular data type. Normal int data type had 4 bytes allocated, but short data type has just 2 bytes allocated to it. Corresponding changes in the range also. Moving on to long, it increases the memory allocation. It either increases or keeps it the same. It depends from PC to PC. So these 4 are data type modifiers. Let's try these out using code blocks. We'll use size of operator to find the size or memory allocated to each of the data types. We'll be printing the value on the screen. So we'll write cout size of, and within brackets either you can write the variable of a particular data type. Because it's of int data type, it will be showing the memory allocated to int data type. Also, you can write int instead of the variable name within the size of brackets. It will give you the same result. So let's print the size or memory allocated to each of the data types on this PC and see the results. This is the memory allocated to each of the data types on this PC which I'm using. 4 is allocated to int, 4 is allocated to float, 8 is allocated to double, and 1 byte is allocated to the char data type. It may vary from PC to PC. Now let's have a look at how to initialize the bool data type. As discussed earlier, bool data type can have just two values, either it is true or it is false. If it is true, it will have a value of 1, and if it is false, it will return a value of 0. Is solved is equal to false, followed by a semicolon. This is how we initialize the bool data type. So this was all in this lecture. See you in the next one. Thank you.